Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today I'll be discussing the game between the Blue Jackets and the Sharks, in which the Sharks lost 4-1 with the empty net goal. Scoring for the Blue Jackets, it was Duclair, Jones, Foligno, and then Anderson, and the only goal for the Sharks was, surprisingly, Kevin Labanc, so I guess it's nice for him to get a bit of confidence, but other than that, really nothing positive that you can take out of this Sharks game. And I've been making many excuses for the Sharks' somewhat inconsistent performance over the past few games. You know, on their road trip, Nashville, Carolina, Anaheim, I said they were changing time zones, and last night against the Rangers, I said it's the first game back. But they were now on their second game of this homestand. They had their day of rest or whatever. They didn't practice, or they had a bit of a day off on the Wednesday, optional skate or whatever. And even with all of that, the Sharks came out flat. Now, they didn't have a massively horrible period like they did against the Rangers, where they were just getting outplayed completely, but it was just such a uninspired game against this Blue Jackets team, where for the first 50 or so minutes of this game, the Sharks couldn't get anything done. And I'll talk a bit about why that was the case as I get further on into this video. But to start off, I will talk about Aaron Dell. He gave up only 3 goals. So, and I've had games in the past where I've said, you know, Dell played well, let's say against the Hurricanes, even giving up 3 goals. I've said it about Jones multiple times. But the issue was, like I said, there were no periods of dominance that the Blue Jackets had. There was no, let's say, Rangers first period or Hurricanes second and third period in which the Sharks were just getting completely outplayed, and so, you know, they were bound to score a goal. In reality, this game came down to the fact that neither team got that many scoring chances, and Aaron Dell just got outdueled by veteran and you know, while he hasn't been having a great season, has been a 2-time Vezina winner, Sergei Bobrovsky. Right, Aaron Dell, the first goal against Duclair, he massively overplays his hand and allows Duclair to capitalize on a wraparound. The second goal, basically can't blame him, deflects off of Jones's skates. But the third goal against Foligno, you really hope Aaron Dell can make a better play than what he did. Even though it was sort of like a breakaway, Foligno had the back-checking Erik Karlsson behind him, so he didn't really have much time and space to make a shot or make anything sort of happen, and yet he was still able to squeeze it past Aaron Dell. Meanwhile, Bobrovsky, you could argue he could have had the Labanc goal, but other than that, Bobrovsky had a very nice game. He didn't have to make too many great saves, although in the last 10 or so minutes of the third period, he did have to be better, but it was a case of Aaron Dell just getting out-dueled tonight. Next is a topic I've wanted to talk about a lot. I haven't really gotten around to it, but that's Joakim Ryan. Now, the arrival of Erik Karlsson would obviously reduce the ice time of some of the defensemen around the team, but I do take issue with how little Joakim Ryan is playing in this game. He actually got a fair amount of shifts in the first and the second period, and I thought, you know, Joakim Ryan, if he can continue at this rate, maybe gets 13 minutes, 14 minutes on the night, not too bad. And I actually was planning on talking about Ryan in this game as someone who was playing pretty solid, and I hadn't talked about Ryan yet, so I was excited, because when I first saw Joakim Ryan last season, you know, in those first few games, I saw him playing so well defensively, and I was saying, you know, this guy could become like a Justin Braun type level player, and maybe, you know, it was a bit of a long shot certainly, but up to Vlasic type of level if he can develop correctly. And that was mostly because I saw him playing with Brent Burns, and you know, it's very difficult to actually be a very strong defenseman playing with Brent Burns. It was impressive to see Paul Martin be able to pull it off for a couple of years, because Brent Burns is such an enigmatic and unpredictable type of player. But Joakim Ryan was doing a very formidable job, and this game was no different. He was playing extremely well and everything like that. You know, no real defensive errors, I could say, maybe a couple, but just small hiccups. And yet in the third period, I could understand if you want to play Burns and Karlsson on the same shift because you're trailing 2 goals, but I don't see a reason why you have to put Burns and Dillon on, just randomly double shifting Brendan Dillon instead of just having his normal partner Joakim Ryan. You know, maybe you could say that Brent Burns is freer to make more risks because he'll have more confidence in Dillon, a more veteran player, to cover his mistakes. But there really is no hesitation in Burns' game. He always makes the aggressive play, even when Joachim Ryan's on the ice. And so Dylan doesn't add some sort of major element offensively that Joachim Ryan doesn't have. Same with Braun and Vlasic, who are also double shifting with Brent Burns, or I guess you could say Brent Burns is double shifting with them. So I don't see why Joachim Ryan gets 0 shifts in the entire third period. I don't understand that move. It's not like he made some major errors during the first couple of periods and then DeBoer wants to teach him a lesson, or like he does with some of the younger players. He actually had a solid first, second period, and yet he still finds himself on the bench, even in just shifts where you're in the defensive zone, or the offensive zone, I should say, and you randomly put on Brendan Dillon or your Marc-Edouard Vlasic, who are, at a similar level, maybe slightly above, but nothing that would make some sort of major difference offensively than Joachim Ryan. And so it really is questionable, and I expected Ryan's ice time to go down, but really not to the point where he would get sometimes not even double-digit type of minutes. And finally, something I do want to talk about in somewhat of broad terms, it is the forward lines again. As this was an issue against the Rangers with the return of Thornton, everything was thrown up into the air, and it didn't work out very well in that Rangers game, and then they were changed, and then they were changed again, and then we came into this game against the Blue Jackets, and they were put back to what they were against the Rangers. That didn't work. I don't know why that was the case, but here's what I think about this. As much as people like to point out that the Sharks had such perfect lines in the previous games prior to the return of Joe Thornton, if we're being 100% honest, the main driving force of the Sharks' offense during those few games was this Hertl, Couture, Meier line. The Suomela, Donskoi, Sorensen line was fun to watch, and they had some decent plays, and Donskoi and Suomela were at times able to combine for a couple of goals. But Marcus Sorensen didn't even have an even strength point up until the Rangers game, where he got one, and that was already when that third line was broken up. So this wasn't some world beater third line that was just absolutely fantastic. And if you look at the first line or the second line or whatever you want to call it, the Kane, LeBanc, Pavelski line, I don't think those three players actually combined for a goal, right? Pavelski had a goal against the Nashville Predators, and it was assisted by Kane, but then also assisted by Logan Couture. The majority of the offense the Sharks were getting for those few games ran through at least one of Couture, Meier, or Hertl, and so that was the major line. And once that line cooled down, as all lines do at some point, I felt as though the Sharks' the other two lines could have been exposed for not actually doing that much, at least in terms of getting on the scoreboard during those few games. So I don't have a major issue with DeBoer trying to figure out something else, because it was going to need to happen anyway, in my opinion. As much as I like Donskoi, Suomela, and Sorensen, and maybe the chemistry could have continued to develop to actually get somewhat of a more stable third line. But my major issue is with what DeBoer does is I have no idea why he separates Hertl, Couture, and Meier. It's almost like he's trying to get ahead of the curve of sort of the up and downs of the NHL, where he says, well, the Meier and Couture Hertl line is bound to cool off, so how about I get ahead of them cooling off and just separate the line completely? It makes absolutely no sense for why he would actually decide to make a play like that. I understand you want to ignite LeBanc's play, and he did get the goal with Couture and Hertl, and you want to get Joe Thornton acclimated, so you put him with a hot Timo Meier. But you have to win games. This isn't the preseason. This isn't a point in the season where you can just start to ease players into it. You need to have already had your chemistry, and the fact that Joe Thornton was injured does hurt that, but still you need to go with what is working, and at least the Hertl, Couture, Meier line, we knew it was working. Now, I suggested in the previous review that the Sharks should go with something like Pavelski, Thornton, Kane, and then on the third line, LeBanc, Suomela, Donskoi. DeBoer actually ends up with these lines by the end of the game, with Sorensen on the fourth, as well as Hertl, Couture, and Meier in the last few minutes, and it actually starts to go pretty well. I thought Kane, Thornton, and Pavelski had a couple of nice shifts together. The Couture, Hertl, Meier line was reunited. The Suomela, Donskoi, and LeBanc line had a decent shift, but I'd like to see a bit more out of that. And so I think DeBoer finally found something by the end of the game, but I also thought that against the Rangers, and yet we went back to the status quo of Meier, Thornton, Pavelski that still didn't work in this game. And so I'm not sure what DeBoer is doing. I am very critical of what he has done here with both Joakim Ryan's ice time as well as the forward lines that he's sort of just throwing up in the air to see what's going to work. And hopefully going into this next game against the Flyers aren't that strong of a team. The Sharks have already beaten the Flyers this season 8-2. Maybe this could be another turning point offensively where the Sharks get some good chemistry going, because no one player offensively was particularly bad, but there was just such a noticeable lack of chemistry between any of these lines, right? Players were just playing in all sorts of positions, and it just wasn't working out. And so DeBoer needs to head back to the drawing board. Hopefully he realizes that maybe he has something that he put together in these past few minutes, and he goes with a Kane, Thornton, Pavelski line and the rest. But at the moment, DeBoer just seems, I'm sure he knows what he's doing, but he seems a bit lost when it actually comes with what to do with Thornton, specifically of where he goes, as well as where the rest of the lines fit in. Class dismissed.